Good morning, everybody, and welcome to The Art as Well. This is our 19th edition, and I'm delighted today to be featuring poet Autumn Richardson. Now, I'm just going to give you a bit of a rundown on Autumn's career. Autumn is a poet, editor, and publisher. Her poetry, texts, and translations have appeared in literary journals, pamphlets, anthologies, books, and exhibitions worldwide. She has been awarded numerous residencies, including the Banff Wired Workshop, the Al Purdy A-Frame Poet in Residence, and the Wordsworth Trust, amongst many others. She co-directs Corbel Stone Press, one of the UK's foremost small presses, dedicated to nature and landscape. She is also co-editor of Reliquiae, a biannual literary journal of poetry, short fiction, non-fiction, and translations. Previous publications include Field Notes in 2012, Memorious Earth in 2015, which she co-authored with her husband, Richard Skelton, Heart of Winter, which I actually bought, you can see it there, and there's a reason for that, which we'll discover later on. Heart of Winter 2016, which is a book of found poems and translations based on the journals of polar explorer Knud Rasmussen, and An Almost-Gone Radiance in 2018, which was selected as a Scottish Book of the Year by the Scottish Review of Books. Her latest collection, Ajar To The Night, was published by Scarlet Imprint in May 2020. Now, Autumn's work quietly focuses on the natural world through a prism of ecology, botanical science, ethnology, herbal medicine, history, and philosophy. Through a practice which combines contemplation and an immersion in nature, she lifts the small and overlooked, the occult or unknown, to the reader's attention. A core intent of our work is to promote and share alternate traditions and beliefs that offer rare and precious insights into our connectedness with the world we inhabit. Recurring themes include pilgrimage, ritual, solitude, survival, veneration for the natural world, and the equality between humankind, plants, and animals. So we're going to start with a short film, which her husband, Richard, made with her, called Transmutation is Our Deity, and it's two poems written and spoken by Autumn.
You came to me as a song that I could not sing. It broke the branches of the tree in which I rested. It broke my rest. You came to me as a torch that devoured me. I was relieved of leaves and left with blood brightness and with thorns. You come to me now as a wind that assails me, with fury and with salt, to purify the wounds of my own making. You are a horn lifted to the sky, a howl piercing the blue cells of the air. All is restless, all is current. There is nothing still upon this earth. You come to me now, a torch that consumes me. I am a wick of bones, floating in an oil of blood. I am mineral smoke. Released of my previous form, I leap a hair into the violet rocks. I slip through perforated stones. My body is burnt amber, the gold of stalks. Within the innards of earth I am unseen. Within the bright pigments of grasses I am unseen. I am the grasses, the stalks, the stones. I feel you as a current, as dark, as sinuous as a cormorant slipping through the belly of the sea. In the caverns of the earth I recognized you, and in the veins of smoke of birch. You are the dweller inside the atria of hills. I lower myself through esophageal stones into dens of scent. Sightless, seeking bulb and frond, I lift from unlit passages, medicines proliferating in darkness. Be the wood that burns, become charcoal, become ash, become a perfume of night. Part from your skins, disarticulate yourself, engender new growth. We are originated from light. Our blood sap, our pores stomata. We are a host of new plants upon this earth. We exhale toxins that fuel the bloom force of others. Transmutation is our deity. We are stamped with everything, and we chant it back as song. Each curlew call, each lamine, each radiation of hooves becomes us. Split your skins and spill your fluids. Water earth with them. Anoint air with your howl. Anoint air with the smoke of your dissolution. This is the divine extraction. This is the blood toll of being alive. We are each of us only a portion of our task, and a sea of unremembering.
Hi.
Hi there.
Very powerful stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're most welcome. We've got a lot to get through.
Thanks
And
for having me.
yeah, not at all. But what I'd like to do is to start to talk about you, and then later we'll talk about your work and poetry. But I mean, you are a multi-talented person. I don't wish to embarrass you, but you are, you know, a photographer, a herbalist, you know, a poet, a writer, an author, a publisher, everything.
I
And you're
don't know
also,
that it's really Richard that's more of the photographer, but I do
well,
love
I think
photography.
you do a little bit too,
Yeah,
though.
I do.
And not that that's enough. You're also a soprano.
Indeed, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So anyway, let's go back to where you started. And you were
Okay.
born in Ontario, or you lived in your early
Yeah,
life in Ontario, in
yeah.
the northern part of the territory. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to grow up there from your early days?
Yeah, I'm from Northern Ontario. I grew up in the boreal forest,
Mhm.
quite far north, North Shore of Lake Superior. Very wild. Certainly shaped me. Certainly instilled a deep love of wilderness and all the things that live within it. I think as well, it instilled in me the feeling of being very small and not being the dominant predator, so to speak,
Mm.
because there are so many other animals that of course, make their home in the far north. And I very much like that feeling of being a part of something and not dominating something.
And
Um,
were you always writing at this point? I mean, did you always
I
write from
was.
an early age?
Yeah, from an extremely early age.
Mm.
I don't even recall when I wasn't writing, but um, when I was 5, I tried to write the Bible out in my own diary, all the stories from the Bible. So that was my project. I did that for ages. Was just trying to write out the Bible. Um, and then not too much longer after that, I became quite obsessed actually with a Canadian author called Farley Mowat. And I don't think anybody over here will know him, but the Canadians will. And he was a biologist and environmentalist.
Yes.
And I think that's when I started solidifying what I wanted to do with my life, which was to be a writer and to use the writing to bring a reader's attention to environmental issues, conservation, wildlife concerns. I wanted to I wanted to go to the far north and study wolves and write about it.
Yeah.
So that was actually my plan for a very long time. And I loved reading. I read everything I could get my hands on. And writing, obviously, constantly. I've literally been keeping journals since I was a small child. I have possibly hundreds of them, many of them probably lost, but even now I have boxes and boxes full in storage.
And when did the music come into play?
So yes, and then quite surprisingly, and I've always loved music, and my mum was a great lover of music. There was always music on in the house, but I had quite a definite plan for what I wanted to do. And then when I hit about 14, 15, it completely changed, and I wanted to be a musician. And so I had part-time jobs, and I saved up, and I paid for my own piano lessons, and I paid for my own piano. And and I loved it. Again, I think I don't do things by half measures. When I wanted to know how to play the piano, at that point I didn't realize that I could sing. I loved singing, but I didn't know I was any good at it. I went full throttle, and then I actually studied music at university. So I started late, but I think my enthusiasm and my hard work paid off, and I got into unis to study music. And that was where I joined the choir and realized really my passion. I loved singing. So, and I also took guitar. I did classical guitar and then folk guitar afterwards.
Yeah. So your college career was purely music, was it?
Yes, completely music.
No literature or anything strange
No,
like that.
I didn't do. I mean, I did. I love ethnography, so folklore. So I did ethno. I loved like studying the history of music. So
Yes.
that was actually probably my besides singing. My favorite courses were music history. So there was a lot of writing involved, but it was essays, of course.
Yes. And then when you finished university, what path did you take at that point?
So during university, and actually, yeah, kind of in my first year, I actually, I wanted to travel very, very much. And I came to Ireland. It was the first place I'd ever been outside of Canada. Yes. I'd never seen the ocean. And I can't tell you why I chose Ireland, because it was purely intuitive. There was no, just like... I was
just about to ask you that, why you chose Ireland.
It's very, I think with most things that I've chosen in my life, except for perhaps Farley Mowat, who definitely was an influence. I really loved his work. I just had my own ideas and I just did them. There was no family or friend influence or teacher or anything like that.
Yes.
If I'm perfectly honest, I actually had a dream that I was in Ireland, and it started me wondering about that. Ireland and Scotland, I'd been quite enamored with for a long time, just the landscape. And so I packed up and I came to Ireland. And to make a long story short, I would travel to Ireland as often as I could during university. And eventually, because of my absolute obsession with traditional Irish music, I fell absolutely in love with it. And with the landscape. It was like coming home, I have to say. I ended up getting a 2-year student visa and actually moving over. And then
where were you based?
I was based in Belfast. And Belfast, actually, I also lived in Edinburgh for a short time and York, but Belfast, I ended up living in Belfast for 5 years. And from there, obviously, would explore all of Ireland. And I continued doing music. I was in a band and I would travel. And when that ended, I was a solo folk musician for a number of years.
Oh, right.
And even when I met my husband, Richard, that was through music, a musical project. That was in 2008. And
where did you meet him?
So I met him actually, in a sense, long distance, because I was doing a record in the south of England, and he was actually also doing music with that same producer. Yes. And that person put us in touch to kind of do a project, and so we started emailing each other. But very quickly, even though we did end up, and we have done actually a lot of music together, all of our emails became about poetry. We both had a passion for poetry, and we were sharing poets back and forth. And that turned into Richard saying, "Why don't we start a poetry press?"
Yeah.
And and the rest is history. Yes.
And is that 10 years ago? Because I think you're celebrating your 10th anniversary, are you?
Yeah. So it was 2008 when we met, and it was 2010 when we married. But we'd already started doing records together and poetry pamphlets together, and we would travel and we would write about the landscape. And then we moved to Ireland. We actually were living, after we were married, we moved to Ballyvaughan in County Clare in the Burren, which is one of my favorite places on earth. I do a lot of writing there, and a lot of writing about that location. But officially, when we came back to the UK, we officially began the partnership legally as an entity. So we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary officially for Corbel Stone Press this year.
Fantastic. And we're going to see some beautiful samples of what you produced later on in our slide presentation.
Indeed.
Yeah. So did the music sort of fade into the background, or is it still very much part of your life?
So for myself,
Sorry.
I'm very slow with things. So when I focus on something, I tend to have to focus completely. So the music was my life for such a long time. And I realized I really hadn't focused upon publishing my writing. I was always doing it, but I was never sharing it. So I decided to focus thoroughly on poetry about 10 years ago when we started the press, and we were doing a lot of our own work. We were also doing music together, and we've released several records, often as special editions that incorporate text and music and objects and art. Hence, you said at the beginning, exhibitions. So we've done exhibitions as well of all of that work. But for me, the poetry, and I also write nonfiction and fiction, but the poetry has taken precedence.
Very good.
That's been my focus.
Yes, excellent. And from my point of view, I was very privileged in that I got a short residency down in Kilreelig, And it was, I think, around this time last year.
It was indeed. It was
and
just now.
Trina and I went down, and we were staying in one of these lovely famine cottages, of which I think there were about 7. And as we drove in, there you were, our neighbour,
yep.
sitting on a chair, looking out to sea with a mug of tea and a book.
Yeah, of course.
So I said, there's a strange artist there. But anyway,
I was the only writer amongst you.
You
All
were.
of the people were visual artists.
That's right.
And I remember thinking, how delightful, because I actually visual art really, really nourishes me. Really, whenever I travel, the first place I tend to go and to find are the art galleries.
Yes.
So even though I'm not so much a visual artist myself, I think I would like to be. Perhaps one day I'd like to deepen that practice. But it was such a joy to be surrounded by all of you visual artists. I felt really inspired.
On the last evening, we all decided to have a sort of a little supper together, and everybody brought what either was their own special dish or a national dish or whatever to one of the cottages. And after that, we did a studio crawl, which was fascinating because we went to everyone's, wasn't it? And I think you were last. I
was indeed, yeah.
And we went from cottage to cottage where each artist did a presentation of their work, if you remember.
So wonderful.
It was absolutely incredible. And then I was second last, but the best was yet to come, which was you. And it was just fascinating because I thought, now, if she's a poet, what's she going to do? You know, she's going to just stand there and read from this mighty tome. But not at all. You told the most fascinating story about the Inuit people and about this explorer and how you actually learned Danish. Isn't that right?
Well, I learned to translate. I didn't learn to speak. Yeah.
No, okay, but to translate. And you went to all that effort. And I think the project took you 2 years or so. 3 years, my gosh. Yeah. But you eventually did do that. And maybe that's something that you'd like to read for us, either now or later on, you know, whichever suits you.
But yes, I've got that with me just for you, Alan.
Oh, you're very good.
You enjoyed that.
But we were all spellbound. And I know a lot of the artists who were there are actually here. I know Jacques is here, Colleen, Owen is here. Yeah. And I'm not sure about...
I'm not sure if Jean is there. She said she was going to try.
Yeah, Jean might be. And then there was... listen, forgive me if I forget. But anyway, yeah, please do. If you just give us a background to it as well.
Yeah. Well, did you want to do... I was wondering if we should do the slideshow first, and then I'll do the reading each. It's very short, but I can give the background to the poems.
Yes.
And then do them both in a row.
Quite happy to do that. So let's bring up the presentation now. Just share a screen again.
So just to explain, when obviously as a poet, it might sound strange to have had exhibitions, but my husband Richard and I, Richard especially, is a multidisciplinary artist, and we all of our work focuses upon and celebrates the landscape, various landscapes. It's both celebratory and elegiac, actually, because it often is celebrating what's been lost, but also what's still there. So this slide, and you can go to the next if you like. This is from an exhibition called Memorious Earth that we had at Abbot Hall and Blackwell's in Kendal in Cumbria. We lived in Cumbria for 4 years, and we did a very large body of work, which we in the end collected all together as Memorious Earth. It was pamphlets and a couple of records and films. Richard is a filmmaker, and lots of visual artifacts, as you'll see. You can go to the next one. For Memorious Earth, it's basically the memory of the earth. The apothecary bottles are used pretty much constantly throughout Corbel Stone Press. They're used as both a way to focus the viewer's attention on what is within them, to draw attention to often things that are quite overlooked within the landscape. We have a lot of like grass and grass seed heads, bracken, yarrow, things found within the landscape that are, of course, in no way endangered. We only collect very sustainably and for conservation purposes, really, because the whole exhibition was about how much has been lost within that particular landscape of Cumbria over millennia, really, but also what is still present and what is trying to return. So you can go on to the next one if you like. Another large aspect to the work is toponomy, which is place names. And through the research of place names, you often discover what has been in the landscape, sometimes thousands of years ago, that no longer exists, that has become extinct. And for this, for example, we became quite obsessed with a location called Ulfa Fell. And there's also an Ulfa village. And Ulfa means Hill of the Wolf. And as you can see here, the name kept changing on cartographical material over time. So this is 1600, 1610, but it goes forward and forward and forward to show the place name changes through the language of whichever peoples move into the landscape. And there have been just so many different peoples, especially in Britain and in Ireland, but especially in Britain, there's just been a plethora of different peoples that come in and move and share and sometimes dominate the same landscape over time. So using place names, you often discover what once was there. And I've already mentioned my interest in wolves and wolf conservation that since I was a small child. And so it was just a real fascination for me, especially that wolves were once in this landscape and of course are no longer. And also other things. There was a fell called Birker Fell, and that's, Hill of the Birch. And, the hill was completely denuded. And, I could go on. There's many examples of that. But all of that is actually encapsulated in our book called Memorious Earth, which we gathered all this information together from the exhibition. And you could go on to the next slide. Similar, these are pottery bowls and tea bowls that are filled with herbs. So that one is dried birch leaves. And the one in the background, I believe, is oak bark. And I use all of these things in my own medicinal herbal practice. I've studied herbal medicine. I'm a wild crafter.
Sorry, what is a wild crafter?
So a wild crafter is just another term for... I haven't, been to school to study herbalism, but I have apprenticed to a herbalist, and I've been studying it for about 25 years. Yeah. And practicing a wild crafter is somebody who actually goes in to the landscape and gathers medicine. Because you can be a herbalist and not ever go into the landscape, but buy your medicines from. I actually make the medicine, so. Oh, really? I make a lot of different medicines in different forms. But anyway, this particular image here, this is just another example of a found object that from the landscape that is just so beautiful. We're just trying to always draw attention to the small, the overlooked, the unique.
Absolutely. It's a work of art in itself, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's what we feel. It's trying to draw people's attention to what they might have surrounding them, that they're not aware of that beauty all around them, just in their own gardens, just in the back moor, or even in a deforested landscape. There's so much. And
even something as simple as this.
Yes, if you start to study grasses, you won't stop, because they're just absolutely fascinating, and their sculptural presentation of a grass is astonishing, really. Yeah. I think that's bog myrtle in the background. This is another example of the language, and the language changes over time. This is a word for birch, and it's showing, it's in the shape of a tree ring. This whole exhibition, we actually exhibited this in Ireland as relics. There were, I believe, 12 different trees presented as tree rings, and in their evolving languages through time. And of course, many of these trees are vanished now. Not the birch, but there's not nearly so many. You can move on to the next. And then the next couple of images are just an example of presentation boxes for special editions, which, as a small press, that's kind of one of our focuses. We do fine art editions of many of our projects. Yeah,
we'll see some wonderful examples later on of that as well.
So yeah, and this was just the totem, really, of the exhibition. Richard found this in a small museum in Cumbria, and we were so grateful that they offered to loan it to us for the exhibition. It is the skeleton of a wolf. So it would have been one of the last wolves in Cumbria.
Very good. So now we go on to the Heart of Winter.
Yes. So this project, as you mentioned earlier,
yeah.
I love to read about polar exploration. I love the North. That is likely due to where I'm from,
yeah.
My childhood. And Knut Rasmussen is especially interesting because he's Greenlandic and his mother was Inuit and his father was Danish. So he spoke both Inuit and Danish. And as an explorer, he wasn't exploitative, which so many were. He loved the landscape. He loved the Inuit peoples and the traditions and the songs and the folklore. And he made it his mission to collect as much of it as possible, because even in his time, which was the very beginning, the turn of the 20th century, he knew it was already vanishing. Mm-hmm. And I was reading many of his journals, and I realized that he was a poet. How he described what he was seeing was so not like many explorers, who are going into a landscape to try to find what they can take from it, what they can give to kind of, the crown to bring in financial gain. His words were just full of both joy and pathos. It was beautiful. So I started working with his journals and assembling found poems from his own words, mm-hmm. From different translations. And then I found a collection of poems that he had translated from Inuit. Well, they're not poems per se, they were songs, because of course everything was oral tradition with the Inuit at that time. But he would hear them and he would write them down in Inuit, and then he would translate that into Danish. Mm-hmm. And what I did, I love Inuit culture and indigenous cultures just in general. I so wanted to read his Danish versions that I took upon myself the task of trying to learn enough Danish to be able to translate his Inuit songs from Danish into English.
Yes.
And that became Heart of Winter. So these pamphlets that you have here were just initial pamphlets of his work and the work of the botanist on the expedition, which was Dr. Thurild Wolff. Mm-hmm. You can go to the next one. It's just some of the text within. And the next one. That's his Danish.
Yes.
And within the book and the special edition, we included illustrations from botanical artwork, which we use a lot. I'm rather obsessed with botanical things, as you've likely noticed. So every botanical print was of a plant that was mentioned by Dr. Wolff, the botanist on the expedition. You can go to the next one and the next one. And this final image these were actually photographs that they took on the expedition themselves. And I found these in some of the old books that Knut had published. And then we scanned these and printed them up, and they turned out beautiful. So this is literally them. This is the expedition, but it looks like a painting, really.
It does, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah. And that's the book itself, which I just showed you.
Yes, which you have.
So will you do a reading after we go through the rest, or do you want to do?
Yes, indeed, I will. I'll read from that one. I'll read from the Inuit translations.
Very good. So we'll move on then to is it Waith exhibition?
Yes, so this was a residency that Richard and I did in the Orkneys on a small island called Papawestray. And we've done several things with all of the material that we gathered. We were there for a month and it was absolutely fascinating. But we did a small exhibition of found objects. Waith is a word from the Orkney dialect, and it means things tossed up from the sea. So detritus, in a way, often things that are from a shipwreck, but we chose objects that we just found whilst beachcombing. So you can just go through the next few slides. That was a tooth. This is a whale vertebra or a porpoise. I can't remember, but this one, it looks like, I think this is a bill of a bird of some kind. I don't know what kind, but the sculptural beauty and the way that light moves through bone. Both Richard and I are quite obsessed with these things, so we tend to collect a lot of them.
Yes, they are, absolutely, yeah.
And this is a holdfast, which is the how a seaweed clasps onto a stone you know, to anchor itself as it moves in the sea. And obviously it looks like driftwood really once it's been dried on the shore. Beautiful.
And beautiful photographs too.
Yeah.
So we move on to An Altar of Sunlight.
Yeah. So this is just an example of a small art edition that I did of one poem called An Altar of Sunlight, which was dedicated to the element of fire. I write a lot about the elements. And this was, it was wrapped in yellow silk, and it was, we print them and cut them and fold them and sew them ourselves here. It was printed in a beautiful kind of ochre ink.
Yes.
You can go on from there. It came, this special edition, which was very small, came with apothecary bottles with various things that I found, a lot of it upon the shore. So it was juniper wood and oak wood shavings, and I believe birch wood and driftwood, of course, juniper berries that were dried.
Fabulous. Yeah.
Go on to the next one. And that's just I think a final photo. I always make incense. I love to make hand mixed incense, and that one had a beautiful kind of one dedicated to the solstice, the winter solstice, with the return of the light.
Lovely.
We don't celebrate the cycle of the year nearly enough, so we both Richard and I try to do special releases often at pivotal points in the year that have to do with the change of the seasons, the change of the light.
And of course, there's one coming up quite soon, isn't there?
Indeed, yes, indeed.
The Veil. Okay, and then we move on to An Almost-Gone Radiance, which is a special edition, and you're going to show us a few examples of the book.
Yeah, so this...
So
this edition came in a wooden box with was the book and some apothecary jars that each were symbolizing the elements. You can't get away with the elements here. I made unique incense for each person, for each box. Yeah. These are just some of the ingredients. That's pine resin, dried yarrow, frankincense.
What's the one in the middle that looks like gold?
Yes, it's pine resin.
Is it really?
Yeah, yeah.
Gorgeous.
Amazing.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
I think there's oak bark there as well. And there's lots of other things. I won't give away all my secrets.
No,
but
don't.
Yeah.
We won't have that.
And that was an embossed sigil on the cover of the book. It was copper in brown. For the special, the special edition was only 8 boxes, but the book itself, we had an initial run of, I think, 144 hard copies. And then we've also done a soft cover, which I think we'll see shortly.
I have it too.
Oh yes, you do.
Tell us about feathers. Now the feathers.
Yeah. So another thing that we collect from the landscape. I always have a box of feathers, and I love to make feather cards. The first edition that I did was actually for a Canadian poet called Don Demansky several years ago, for a beautiful, very small edition of a poem of his called Field Notes. It was 44, and I did 44 feather cards. I had no idea. It's very, very meticulous, which I do love meticulous work. It took a very long time to do 44 of them. So for this special edition, I did 8. And it was a unique feather, and this symbolized the element of air.
Yes.
Within each, and they're beautiful frames. So
gorgeous feathers too, aren't they? Okay, some more feathers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, just always drawing attention to the art that already exists naturally all around us. And those were some of the jars that went into the boxes. That one that you can't really tell what it is because it's white is actually sea salt. And each person had a unique semi-precious stone that they were given separately, and then they filled the jar themselves with the salt and then placed the stone. That's a fire agate. Beautiful idea, yeah.
And there's the book.
And that's the soft cover.
Yeah.
And on the cover there actually is a photograph that I took, or Richard might have taken that one. I'm not sure. We've both taken a lot of pictures of this particular statue of the goddess Tara at the Tibetan Buddhist Center that's quite close to us.
Yes.
And she's holding the jar of medicine. So I thought that was just perfect. The divine feminine and the healing imagery.
Yeah, beautiful. And the final one is Ajar To The Night. Your latest edition.
Yes, this is my latest collection. It came out just this late spring, early summer with Scarlet Imprint, a small, beautiful publisher of esoteric
literature in all forms. They do the most astonishing special editions, as you'll see. This was a slip case that was embossed with silver, and the book inside was white, also embossed with silver gilt edging. There were only 15 of these. There's 2 examples that I was lucky enough to have for myself. The book comes out, as you can see, I think, in the next one. Oh, I might not put that. That's just a small part from within.
Yes.
And then there was also a standard hardback, and again with the circle on the cover is kind of meant to be both 2 half moons, but also like an Ouroboros, a circle of life, and metempsychosis, which is the cycle of lives.
Yes. Which
is what the collection is about. And that's the soft cover. And the film that we saw earlier, I was reading from that collection.
Yes, yes. Okay, and I think that's the last, isn't it, Autumn?
It is indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
That was just to try to give a little indication of what we do here at the press and how we combine different elements to do the work. To show.
Wonderful work. An amazing array of work. So, Autumn, I'd like you to give us a reading, if you would.
I'll do a short reading for you.
Yeah, and also I want to get to questions as well to give people a bit of time to ask. So
I'll start with Heart of Winter.
Yes.
Because Alan had told me he'd enjoyed that reading in the story, and so I'll just reiterate slightly. It's this book is assembled found poems from the journals of polar explorer and ethnographer Knut Rasmussen, who was born in Greenland. And he collected songs and stories from Inuit peoples that he met throughout his travels in Greenland and also northern Canada and all the way to Alaska at the turn of the 20th century. He had a small collection called Snøheitin Sange, which means snow hut songs in Danish. He had translated from the Inuit into Danish these songs that he'd collected from different villages all throughout his journeys. This poem that I'm going to do 2 for you. This first one is from a woman shaman. She was so moved during a gathering of people that she stood up and spontaneously spoke these words, and Knut recorded them. Her name was Uvuvnuk, so these are her words. I've called it movement. The great sea moves me. The vast waters have sent me adrift. They move me so I tremble like a weed in the currents. The vast sky opens me. Its immensity blows through me like a wind. It tears through me so I tremble with joy. And I'll do one more from Snøheitin Sange. This was from a man from eastern Greenland. It's called Song of Spring. I was out in a kayak seeking land. I came to a snowdrift which had begun to melt. And so I knew that it was spring and we had survived the winter. And I had feared my eyes would be too weak to see all of the beauty.
Wonderful, yeah. I mean, to think of the origins of those words is quite moving, isn't it?
It's very moving, and also to think that this was a time when people they're celebrating, and yet their lives are very tenuous. You know, he didn't know he would make it until spring to see the next year, and to think that he was celebrating seeing the beauty.
Yes.
It's a different way of seeing and engaging with the world. And I think that's what I'm drawn to and what I hope to share also with my own work.
I think we could all do with a little bit of that in our lives.
Yes, that is the hope anyway.
Indeed.
I'm going to do a poem for you from An Almost-Gone Radiance. So that's this book here.
Yes.
And This is called When the Deities Are Tended, Morning Comes. I see the curvature of the earth, its great bent back, wind-scathed rocks, and juniper crouched into stone. Stars roost in high darkness. All here bend to the elements, and so do I, leaning into fire, tending coals. This is the altar, and I offer the sun's cells, excised from cedar and birch, joints of driftwood. They become the heat of my blood, the sap of my lips. Smoke blooms, antiseptic, alterative, enters the cavities of my body, the pores of the forest, mingles with the violet notes of coyote, who comes in close.
It sort of brings you to the forest, doesn't it?
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we've much time, so I'll just do one more.
Sure thing. Yes. Yes.
This is a recent poem. We published it in our a recent journal. We have a journal called Reliquiae, which we publish twice a year, and it's dedicated to nature and landscape and folklore, mythology. And this was a poem that I wrote for that. It's called Theurgy. Theurgy is the intervention of the divine or the supernatural in human life. I wrote this actually in the Burren.
Did you? Yeah.
There in Ireland.
Yeah. Very good.
Here where the torsos of hills are digested by rain, where bright occult life ignites from arteries of earth, I follow perfumes into darkness. I follow voices of water. I seek the scouring hands of the elements, for I would be pruned of all that enthralls me. I would be made gaunt, a stick of hunger seeking truth. Things you cannot escape, you should go to meet them.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Autumn. Okay, anybody got any questions they'd like to ask Autumn? Just don't forget to unmute yourself.
I wanted to ask Autumn, where does she go to write these poems? Does she go into a forest or go up on a view of a mountain to write them? Or does she sit in a cozy place and use her imagination? You know, is she out in the open air where she gathers the power and the variety? And their choice of words are lovely. The idea of the voice of the waters, it has huge voices, but have never ever put a word on it. And the same, the mountains being digested by the rain. That's a lovely one.
Very true down in Ballyvoan anyway, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. That's such a lovely question. The answer would be it's a bit of both, actually. I go into the landscape. I do a lot of writing in Ireland. I come to Ireland as often as I can. Often I go to the Burren, Fanor and Ballyvoan, different places. I always have my journal. I take my journal out and I write. But also I'll tend to go off and either rent something for some time, or if I'm a poet in residence somewhere. Solitude is a huge part of what I do. I go into a very meditative state when I write. For me, writing is actually a process of listening. I never plan what I write. In some ways, I could almost say I don't choose it. I listen and I write down what I hear. And so I do that both in the landscape and also if I'm in a space for a few weeks on my own. I do a lot of meditation and a lot of walking. and hill climbing, whatever happens to be there, if it's a shoreline or a mountain. And then I just write, and I write quite automatically. And I don't edit. I just write and I write and I write and I write. And I'll do that for a certain amount of time. It might be within a landscape, or it might be when I'm back at the cottage, or it could be when I'm here at home in my office. But I tend to edit afterwards. So, for example, when we were in Kilrealik and we had our beautiful little cottages, I would write both outside and also every morning in the cottage, and most evenings by the fire. I love fire. I like to read and to write beside a fire if I can. And then months later is when I start to edit. I go through everything. I find the lines. I find that sometimes things come fully formed, but sometimes they don't, and I choose and I put them together. So it's a bit of both.
Thank you.
Do you ever feel that you're channeling something?
Well, I don't know if I should use the word or not, but to be perfectly honest, that's kind of maybe the hope. I find with writing, it was the same for me with music. I listened, I heard the melodies, and then I tried to translate them. I think of myself more as a translator.
Yes.
And I just hope that I, can get some of it correctly, because, it's so fast and it goes so quickly. It's like trying to draw something through. It is like being a straw or a conduit. I write about that a lot, about being a conduit or a filament, over the earth.
Yes.
We're here and we use our sensory apparatus to take in everything surrounding us. And then for myself, and then I try to give that back in a form of reverence and as a form of gratitude for having received, to be able to see and experience and smell and touch all the textures within nature. This planet, our home, is an incredible gift. It's an incredible, I think, privilege. So that's what I try to do with the writing and with all artwork that I do, to try to give back how I see it or how I feel it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and highlight its beauty, I suppose.
Exactly, and it's sacredness, really. It's divine. Earth is divine.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Okay, anybody else? Let me just see. I need to read something here. I can't try to get it.
I see somebody's mentioned Leonard Cohen. How wonderful! I love Leonard Cohen. I really love Leonard Cohen.
Oh, Dennis, yes, absolutely. So did Dennis, yeah.
He was a great hero of mine.
Yeah, Olivier, who I think you met in the gallery in Dublin when you were there. Am I right? Olivier Cornet?
I've only met him online, but yes.
Ah, right, okay. And he says, love your words, your practice, and the mark making on the cover of your publications.
Oh, thank you. Mark making is very significant for us.
And Yvonne Maloney says, the irony of your name doesn't escape us. Very aptly named. I think that's the first thing I said to you, because it was autumn when I came down.
Yeah,
how appropriate. Oh dear. Yeah, I fell for that one. Production of your work is so beautiful. Have you read Seamus Heaney's poem, Aisling in the Burren?
Yes, yeah, I've read a lot of Heaney. I love him. Him as a man, he was just the most remarkable poet. I mean, we've not talked a lot about poets, and perhaps that's all right. But I love Seamus Heaney. I also love his prose. But yeah, yes, he loved the burn, and he captures it beautifully in his work.
Yes,
Maggie Shore.
Yes. Okay.
It goes without saying that Yeats is actually one of my greatest influences as well. And long before I was actually confident enough to begin sharing and sending out my work for publication, I mean, I've been carrying Yeats around in my pocket for I don't know how long.
Really, yeah. Was that any inspiration for you to come to Ireland in the first place?
Well, actually, no, because it would have been, I came to Ireland for the first time when I was 18.
Yes.
And I knew about Yeats, but I have to be perfectly honest. I remember initially trying to understand it, and it took me some time. I mean, I was a child, but I remember with Yeats was the first poet. I'd studied quite a lot of poetry in school before that, but I remember thinking to myself, I don't entirely understand this, but I really want to. I want to get inside this, that was what it felt like. It was a world that I was on the outside of, and I was knocking, and I wanted to be within it. And it was Yeats that, for me, I came through the door. There was just a time when I suddenly felt like I was within his work rather than outside of it. So he was a great, just a great gift and a great influence.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else?
I think
hi, Colleen. Did you want to say something, Colleen?
I do. I finally, yes, I would love to say, Autumn, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much. I loved getting to hear about all of it. And just really want to say, you really emanate your work. Just in knowing you and getting to meet you at the residency, what you brought to that experience was so profound. Getting to see the landscape and hear about it through your eyes, I learned so much and picked up on so many things that I wouldn't have. Thank you for that. It was really inspiring.
Thank you. I'm so glad. That's really lovely to hear. Thank you, Colleen. Oh, everybody at that residency nourished me so much as well with all of the work that was being shared. It was phenomenal. I've never experienced a residency like it.
Gail Redmond asks, how will you celebrate Samhain? So fab hearing your poetry.
Oh, Gail, what a wonderful question.
Yeah.
Samhain is near and dear to my heart. It would be, the Celtic New Year. We always have a fire, and we always, we consider it a new year. So we make lists of what we've done in the previous year, what worked, what maybe didn't work, what we'd like to carry over into the new year, and what we'd like to release, let go, and we let those go to the fire. And sometimes, if it's beautiful, we'll go out walking. We've actually written work at Samhain before, and it's such a powerful time. It's my favorite time of year, without a doubt.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Very good. And there'll be plenty of incense burnt and stuff, I'd say, is there?
Plenty. There's a lot. I've got all my pestles and mortars and loads of ingredients up there.
Wonderful. Robert Kelly says, beautiful presentation, Autumn, and very enriching.
Oh, thank you.
Yvonne Maloney asks a very good question. Where can we buy your work?
Well, you can buy it at corbelstonepress.com. Mm-hmm. I think Alan might be putting that up with the YouTube.
Well, I'll put it on the YouTube, the text underneath.
Yeah, and so we sell, you can join the mailing list, and that's a lovely way, because otherwise when the special editions come out, they tend to go very, very quickly. But we try to also always put out soft cover editions later, and also the journal is always available. And I should also mention, because my last book was published with a different publisher, I mentioned them earlier, called Scarlet Imprint. So you can get my latest book with scarletimprint.com.
Very good.
But Alan will put those links.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, Richard has produced a massive body of
massive body of work. Again, Corbel Stone Press.
It'll be on that.
Yeah, well. It's all there. He's done so many books and so many records. He's a composer as well as a poet and an author. And so there's loads there. Hopefully you might enjoy. Join the mailing list is always good, because then you get first dibs on any new thing that comes out.
All right.
And we'll actually have several new things coming out shortly, within the next couple of weeks. One of which is a special edition that will be including work and photographs from Kilreelig.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And your husband, Richard, says you can also order the books from your local bookstore. So, that's what they're there for. Well done, Richard.
Well
You got that in.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. Yes, of course you can. Many of the books are available to order, online or your local bookstore. All
right. So you give the name, and which is perfectly memorable.
Yeah.
And they'll dig that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you might have to pay for it first, because Xylem Editions, which is a branch of Corbel Stone Press, is print on demand, and we did that so that it would be more ecological to be printed within the countries where the books are being bought. But I think you might have to tell them that when you're ordering it.
Nice idea. Yeah. Very good. Very good.
Well, thank you very much, Alan, for having me, and for all of these wonderful people that have commented. Just such a joy to see all your faces, and thank you.
Well, it was such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much. And if you're watching this after the event on YouTube, do give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe. because the more subscribers we have, the better it is for our guest artists and also you, the viewers, to attract the sort of caliber of people like Autumn that we want to bring on board. So thank you all, and thank you so much for your time, Autumn. You've put a huge amount of effort into this, into the whole presentation, and to Richard for the film and everything else like that. So we really do appreciate it, and thank you so much on behalf of myself and everybody who's listening and about to listen. So thank you.
Thank you.